live? Let me check my live streaming service over here on this hot topic that I know everybody gives a shit about. Haha. Anyways, maybe, I'm kind of a little bit high profile in my own area. And just so you know, many people will not actually. Okay, cool, so it's up there. A lot of people will not actually, even Asian Americans will not actually be aware of this point. It's just, our topics aren't really covered or deemed important. But let's get to, for those of you who do care, the term Asian. Actually, I feel like this Time article does a pretty decent job of capturing, right, my understanding and my experience of what happened with the term Asian American. So let's take a look at this article right here. This stuff about the California Berkeley. Look, I'm not from California. I don't know about that, but some of the other stuff later on does talk about it. So it says, in 1968, let me actually show the article on the screen. Okay. In 1968, these activists coined the term Asian American. Notice that the term is Asian American. All right, let's get to that because this is actually quite an important issue right here. So over here, let's see, which was aimed at increasing the visibility of artists of activists of Asian descent. Okay, so this term Asian, right? Let's say, okay, we see the American Indian movement. We see that there is a term that wants to bring the different groups of people of Asian descent under one larger umbrella. Okay, we're going to talk. Let's take a look at that as well. Okay, so now we see the specific ethnic subgroup, and they talk about Japanese American, Filipino American, and when a broad term was used, it was often Oriental, racist, colonialist connotations. The whole fact that we're using the English language is a colonialist connotation right there. So, whatever, right? But, and also the term Oriental was actually used to originally describe Palestinians, which is also by Edward Said, so that's a different thing. But just growing up the way I did, I knew people that looked like me there's certain biases, there's certain stereotypes that really exist for someone like myself. Some of those are similar for people from Indian descent, some of them are not. Some of them are similar to people who are Turkish, some of them are not. Are Turkish people considered Indian Asian or Arabic? Even that's not really, people just invent their own terms, whatever, right? But let's take a look at really one of the key features of just myself, just really, I know this quite well. Okay, I was lost in Ladder Valley and other Asian Americans, if that's true. Asian last names, Chokenji, yeah, probably Asian surnames, that's true. Chinese and Japanese American, Asian American couple. Notice that once again we see these kinds of East Asians, right? Yeah. Let's call it Orientals. I think it's just more descriptive, makes more sense, right? Another thing that we take a look at is a fact of the matter that often, in terms of this term Asian American, notice that came out of, academics, right? They were charter founders, supporters at UCLA. Okay, we know that the California has more Asians, I guess you could say, right? But notice that they keep using the term Asian American, right here, because one of the biggest issues that we face is people think that we're not really Americans. That's really, our experience is not really accepted as being American. It's considered to be Asian all the time. Why are we less Asian than you? Why are we less American than you? It's a huge issue. So the fact that you call people Asians, okay, means that, right, are they in Asia? Asians will watch this unfold in the news and realize that the enemy had faces like their own. Asian was saying, bring our boys home, but for Asians they were saying, stop killing our Asian brothers and sisters, okay? So, Asian, you mean Asian Americans watch this unfold on the news, right? Okay, so there's a difference between Asians from Asia. When I grew up in this country, there's no real, I grew up separated from other, especially my mom had extremely negative experiences with Koreans and Korean. She didn't want no part of it. She came here and I didn't learn Korean. I could have learned it later. I learned a little bit of Korean later on in college and stuff, but I didn't really wasn't brought up speaking Korean. I was brought up to be American. Yeah. Let's look at American music, right? Let's look at American. Well, I'm supposed to listen to Smashing Pumpkins now because they have one guitarist or something that's Filipino or something. Come on, man. Just not into that music. You know what I mean? Just not. You know. I mean, there's a couple of Asians here and there. You know, they did well in the turntable scene. And by the way, I just want to shout out right now since I'm making this video right here. Fifth Platoon. A lot of people out here, they say, you hear me say again and again, there's no Asian such thing as an Asian American activist. Yes, there is, right? What about this guy running for office, Melquiades Gagarin, right? Yeah, there are people out here. Didn't win though. Yeah. But we can see that a lot of the Asians that people listen to are the ones who kind of they're in these schools and have these big titles and stuff, right? The incident took place with automated success of Japanese car manufacturers. They killed a Chinese guy. The fact that you looked Asian, okay, they ain't killing no Indian people because of Japanese cars, right? They're killing a Chinese guy. There's a difference, okay? There's a difference. So when they turn this term Asian, right, and it's based on the way you look, right? Race is not actually a real. It's a made-up thing. It's a made-up division, right? And it doesn't have to do with necessarily like Latinos, right? Yeah, Latinos could look black or white, right? Like there's a wide range, but there's still, you know, this race. It doesn't even really necessarily make a lot of sense that people do whatever they do, you know. Also, the term. Let's take a look at some other things here because I was thinking about inviting them over to have a discussion on this particular topic. I believe these two activists are now no longer alive. Separation caused by China how Japantown went down because I think enclave started to house other Asian groups. Notice they're using the term Asia again, but they're not talking about Indians, right? What is that? I'm sure Indian people are annoyed by this constant phenomenon happening to them as well, right? I would be annoyed. Asian American Studies Center. By the way, just so you know, there's a lot of schools that have an Asian Studies program, and that was often quite colonialistic and, you know, like white people studying Africans and stuff like that, you know, like they're like this weird thing that needs to be studied, right? Instead of being brought in and having a, you know, a conversation or treated like partners, there's something, you know, exotic to be studied. So whatever, everything could be exotic, even within your own culture, you know. But once again, take a look right here. Asian American was meant to include Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and Filipino. That's people who look like me, right? Not really South Asians. It's based on your look, and when people look at you, they think about you. They make certain assumptions in a certain way. So Asian Americans once again deserve to have their own center. So I'll be actually contacting some of these Asian American Studies programs. We are at 10 o'clock, so it's going to be 7 o'clock on the west coast, a little too early. The UCLA really, there was another phenomenon that was happening at the time during, I believe, 90s, 80s, I believe probably like early 90s. And the thing is that, you know, there's actually this cool little video of this guy. He's a Malaysian comic, and I talked about. It was funny. He's like, "Black people are so cool. You get to own your own slur, right? You're allowed to use it. No one else is allowed to use it. It's kind of like that thing, right?" And actually, I listened to a. Once again, there's not a lot of Asian American activists who are really easy to, you know, find out about or to be inspired by. So I remember one thing that we brought over to, and a lot of the, actually, just so you know, a lot of the Asian American activism gets wrapped up in the Chinese stuff since they're so large and strong here. But Koreans, we have our own set, but we're dealing with our own issues, and it's not the same thing. We're not necessarily as united as others may think. We're not as divided as we may think either, yeah. a couple things going on. Depends on what generation you're from. It depends on when you immigrated here. What generation? I mean, like there's first generation, second generation, third generation Korean Americans out there, right? And even the definition of what a first or second generation is varies between groups. Now, a lot of people will say that the ones who actually were born here are the first generation Americans, but I would actually argue that the first generation are the ones who are actually the first ones to become citizens. So if you were born here, you're probably a second generation Korean American. That's how I would like to define it. Why would we say that people who become full citizens should actually be considered Americans, right? Yeah. So actually, I'm going to be reaching out to this particular group because I would like to have talked to Ichioka first, right? This person in particular, but I don't think that's really available. I think he's dead right now. Maybe not a while ago. So I'll be actually hooking up and contacting people from the UCLA Department of American Studies and asking them really about, for example, right, I think these people in these schools and stuff, they're not going to be talking to people on the ground. They're going to have no idea about Yang's issues or problems, right, regarding, the 100% white staff of the Forward Party. If a prominent black leader had 100% white staff, that wouldn't go down easy, right? Not at all. That would not go down at all. This would not really be able to happen. Not saying that people have to just be there because they're Asian American, but this would be questioned. This would be criticized. This would be people would ask what's going on, but there's no real concern or care about it in the mainstream media. It's up to you to decide if you want this to be an issue or not, right? And a lot of people are just going along with what the common thought process is. They're just going along with the flow, just going along with what the status quo is. And the status quo is that Asian American issues really do not matter that much. So this to me is clearly it should be recorded for history. So I'll be contacting Asian American Studies professors who are usually more happy to have time with big shot like Yang than myself and have a discussion, but I'll be asking them what they think about this, and I will, besides the academics departments, which often will not listen to someone like myself, who's a whistleblower, who's has a history of work, they will listen to a certain set number of individuals. So a lot of y'all out there, oh, I'm sorry, was one thing I actually was in the middle of, and I actually did not finish my thought on. So the fact is that during the 90s, there was this idea that blacks can own their own slur, right? And people saw power in that. So instead of calling people handicapped, now you call them disabled. Now instead of calling people, I could say some bad words, right, about gay people. I'm just not. I could use that. I don't want to do that. You know what I mean? The word is just comes from a real, disrespectful, like violent kind of, I don't appreciate that. You know what I mean? I could do that to you. You can see how you feel about it. Like if you think it's something that's casual or trying to make a point, then go ahead. But it's not really. You don't have to care. I do. Either way, right? Yeah. But the fact of the matter is that this Asians were looking for a term like Oriental that they wanted to say was bad. But I would say that you could see that the article even says that most people didn't really, they used it themselves even, right? Yeah. When a broad term was used, it was often Oriental, which held racist and colonialist connotations. Most Orient people were not really focusing on the racist and colonialist connotations of the word itself, but the way they were treated, right? And the fact of the matter is that if I say, yo, I just fucked those Asian hookers over there, you know what I mean? That comes because they're poor, because you destroyed their country and all this other stuff. If you say messed up things about, like, I don't date Asian men because they look like my brother, whatever, right? Whatever kind of messed up thing you say, and just the fact you place the term with the word Asian makes people feel like that somehow they did something better. That's not better at all. It's the same shit with a different word. And but it's easy. It's an easy thing to do, and people want to feel better about themselves. And now they've done enough. They've done something, so that means they've done enough. They don't need to really actually investigate the problem or really understand the problem. They've done something, and something's better than nothing. So this term Asian, right, which is actually, you'll see over here that they really talk about the fact of stressing the Americanness, right? The American identity, which we are denied. So let me see if I can find it within this article right here. Okay. Aha. Now, the term Asian American right here underscores the fact that we are all Americans. We are not perpetual foreigners, but we're not like other Americans, right? But we don't really use the term African American that much. We don't really use the term European American that much, or Australian American, or any of that kind of thing, really. If you're from Australia, right, yeah, you white or you black or whatever, right? Usually white, I guess, yeah? It's not the same thing. It really isn't. If you're from Russia, right, from Siberia, and you look white, or if you look like, half Asian, half white, you're either white or supposedly Asian, right? You're both from Asia. It doesn't make sense. It's not even close to accurate or precise in any way, yeah? So the term, once again, Asian, when I'm called Asian, they drop off the American part. And I get when you call blacks blacks, you don't say black Americans. You don't say, you know, white Americans. So why would you say Asian Americans? Just say Asian, right? So blacks, whites could be Americans, and Asians, right? Yeah? That's quite exclusionary. How many times do you think when I grew up people told me to go home? Go home. Yeah, go home. Where's home, right? Not here. Not in America. Go home to fucking Korea. They want me gone. Yeah. So a lot of people out there, they using this term Asian, and every time I hear it, I'm, a little bit inside, I'm like, I'm not really cool with it. But it's too much bother to go and explain the whole shit, and you know they don't mean it that way anyways, really, most of the time. So they're just following what society said. And what part of society made this claim right here? Once again, it was the academics, not the people on the street. Instead of talking and listening to actual, right, Asian people, Oriental people, whatever you want to call us, right? Yeah, they listened to what a very few sub-select group said, took a piece of it, ignored part of the message, right? And especially the fact that the term Asian Americans was the fact that we are all Americans. Okay, they just didn't even understand that part, or really pay acknowledgement to a huge part of the term Asian American. Hacked the shit up right into a thing that was convenient for them. Reaffirmed their own biases, called that progress, and moved forward. Now, let me know what you think about my take on this particular situation. Once again, if you're using the term Oriental or Asian, I'm not mad at you. I get that's just what society tells you to do, and you're not really putting a lot of deep thought into it. And really, there's a lot of other things that you could pay attention to, right? Like, what about the complete absence of Asian American men in the progressive space or in entertainment or things like that? You could, right? There's Asians from Asia, but not Asian Americans, right? And a lot of people just, as long as it was represented, they're cool with it, right? So imagine that I just said, in whatever field you working in, okay, let's pose you a white American. I just said, you know what, in your job right now, fuck it, like, I'm just gonna, no more Americans from your, right, yeah, you're just not allowed in. We're gonna hire these cheaper whites from Europe. We got white representation, and now, fuck you, you're done. And all of a sudden, they'd wake up to the incongruence. They'd wake up to the unfairness of the situation. They'd be like, oh my god, this is unacceptable. But when the shoe's on the other foot, they do not it's all right. Oh, Harvard's discriminating against those Asian Americans. Well, they're rich. It's all right. They don't really suffer. It's all right. Yeah, they're not really American. It's all right. It's not all right. That's the real problem, not the term Asian or Oriental or any of that shit. believe it or not. And you could take my word, or you could take the word of they were not pushing the term Asian. They were pushing the term Asian American. But hey,